here we are with LEGO Force Awakens by Traveller's Tales, latest in their long line of LEGO games. And when I say long, they've been doing these since 2005 with their first Star Wars LEGO game, which for one series is a long time to go. The great thing about LEGO games is they all follow a very similar theme, so it's very cheap and easy to see if it's a game that you want to get into. Basically, you have a story mode, which plays through the stories of whatever they're doing. Usually it's following films, but there's the occasional one or two that do their own thing. Like, for instance, LEGO Dimensions, I think, has its own thing going on. LEGO Worlds obviously has its own. And the LEGO Marvel Superheroes does its own story because it was done before the Avengers, which there is an Avengers one as well, so that's good. So yeah, you play through the story mode, you have set characters for each level, and you can't get everything. That's the key part of this. This is the replayability. On your story mode playthrough, you can't get everything. What it intends for you to do is, after you've unlocked several characters, especially with lots of different abilities, ideally a character per ability that can cover everything that you might ever need, you go back and you play it in what's called free play mode. That free play mode will randomly select characters for you to play as and be able to switch between. You can manually select two yourself, basically player 1 and player 2, because there's always two characters minimum, and the rest it randomly picks based on what it knows the level needs. So that increases replayability. Between the story modes you have an overworld where you can travel around, buy things like other characters which you may or may not have the choice to. You may be given some by the story, you might be able to buy some just based on you've encountered this character. You can also buy red bricks you found, which will give you special bonuses. Most of the default ones to begin with are things like multiplying the amount of studs you collect. Now you're probably saying, studs? What are those? Those are the currency of the game. That's what you collect going around, doing puzzles, blowing things up, destroying other LEGO blocks and buildings in the level. And the more you get, the more you can obviously spend on characters and special abilities, even invulnerability, but it's expensive. The key thing is to get the multiplier blocks first, because then they multiply the number of studs, so you'll have more money, you'll more likely complete the stud collection total per level, because that gives you a little bonus, what's called a gold block. And there's, I think, usually 3 of those in a level you can find. One of those gold blocks is based on getting a set number of studs per level, which is doable in the story sometimes, not every time, because entire sections of a level might be cut off from story mode, ready just for being able to explore with other characters when you go back into what's called free play, which is where you explore a level you've already done, but you're not doing it via the story, so you're not locked into their characters. Now, when they started, they originally didn't have any voice acting. Obviously, they're a small studio, they didn't have much of a budget, and so they had their little figures pantomimed. They mimed around what they were doing. And me personally, I preferred that to using the voice acting, although at least in Force Awakens, some of the voice actors have returned to do their own voices. So it's not just ripping lines from the DVD or whatever, which does, well, make it more enjoyable. It's not like, you don't feel like you're doing a rehash of what happened in the films, for instance, which is a good thing. Other ways to get bonus things, there are, well, characters in peril in the Harry Potter ones, which are my personal favourites, I will say straight out. They're called students in peril because they're students, but in anything it's a character in peril. In the Batman ones, when they started introducing that, at least in the third one, which I noticed, it was Adam West, and I believe it is actually Adam West voicing the character calling for help, which is nice. In the Marvel one, it's Stan Lee. Because, well, it's Stan Lee. But in Harry Potter, it's just random students. I don't think they're a student of any particular model or any meant to represent anybody in particular. With Lego Star Wars, well, with Lego Force Awakens, you might think that's an expensive game to get into if you're not sure you're going to like it, because they appeal to certain play styles and types of games you may or may not enjoy, which is the more simplistic adventure type games more than anything, with a bit of puzzle solving, very arcadey, but that's a good thing with its drop in and out of two-player system, so if somebody needs to quickly go do something, they don't have to pause the game, they can just drop out, go do whatever they need to do, come back and drop back in. And in the meantime, the computer, the console, whatever, controls that missing player. As a bot, it knows when it needs to be in certain positions to do certain things, and most of the time it actually does what it's meant to do. Other times you'll just have to switch between characters and fiddle around a bit. That's a little more common in the early games when they haven't fully figured out the bug testing of the bots, basically. So I've never encountered a game where it made it impossible. And I've got well over half of the Lego games, and I'm just looking at my list. I made 18 Lego games, and they're on various consoles and PC, all the way from 2005 to, as I'm recording, 2016. So 11 years. The key ones I would recommend if you want to see if it's a sort of, well, it's its own genre in a way, but see if it's a genre you want to get into. The Harry Potter ones, because they came along in 2010, so they'd already got their grip on how they were figuring things out. 2010 and 2011, because there's two of them, one for films 1 to 4, and then films and books, and one for years 5 to 7. Luckily, Pads Out I can say the same, because they do focus more on the movies rather than the books, so there's 8 movies, so it cuts right in half quite nicely. The other ones I would highly recommend to see if it's what you like are the Star Wars ones, specifically Star Wars prequel trilogy, which will be the first one, and then there's a Star Wars original trilogy which came out 2006, a year later. They did then combine them into a complete edition in 2007, and there is also Star Wars Clone Wars in 2011. Even though I'm a big Star Wars fan, I wasn't that gripped with the Clone Wars, so I wouldn't recommend it unless you're basically wanting to get as many Lego games as you can. Looking at the list, I've got everything but the Indiana Jones and the Pirates of the Caribbean and the Hobbit. Oh, and I don't have anything since last year. Dimensions, Avengers, or Worlds. I don't have any of those yet, but give it time. Mainly don't have them because I don't have the sorts of money to buy them as yet. I mean, I'm only able to look at Force Awakens by using a friend's copy and recording the video on his computer, and then bringing it over to mine to edit and upload. You can find them on various cheap websites. I do highly recommend kinguin.net. I'll put a link in the description and probably an overlay as well. For instance, I got the Batman Trilogy. Yes, there's Batman games. And there's 3 of them. I got the trilogy, so the pack of 3 for under £5, under £5 UK pounds. That's probably about $7 or $8. I don't know, the interest rate is going bananas at the moment. You can get individual games for a couple of pounds, say $3, whatever. So they're very cheap to get in on the earlier ones, see what they're like. And they're not very system demanding, so it's a good way of finding out if you would enjoy these games. And if you do, then you broadened your horizon of games, which is always a good thing. And if you don't, you only have to, a small amount, a few dollars, a few pounds, not even 5 of whatever currency. So, yeah, almost everyone can soak that if they've got a computer. But if you've got a console, just look for, go into, well, GameStop or whatever your local shop is that sells used console games, and you should be able to find them pretty cheap there. Probably not as cheap as Kinguin, but that's the PC market for you. It's always cheaper. On the money side of things, this is where the more recent ones start to get a bit questionable. Previously, when you bought the game, you got the game, and that was it. And that was all the way up to 2012, so 7 years of games. That's 12 of their Lego games. You just got what was on the disc, and that was that. Yeah, maybe a patch on PC or whatever, I don't know. I don't think any of them actually ever patched anything, because they were pretty polished when they came out, but anyway. But then when we get to Marvel Superheroes in 2013, we start seeing the inclusion of DLC. Granted, for that it was character packs. For The Hobbit, it was, it was going to be the final film, because they'd only done the first two when it would come out, so... And since they follow films for the most part, where they can, they had to wait for the Battle of Five Armies to come out. And because the Hobbit films weren't doing that well, they decided not to do the DLC, because they didn't think there would be a market for it. To be honest, I can't blame them. The Hobbit is one of those that isn't rated as highly as some of the others. Again, the Indiana Jones ones aren't rated as highly. Same with the Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know about Dimensions and Worlds. I haven't really looked at them at all, but the rest of them are rated pretty good. So stick with one of those, and you should have a very good, enjoyable experience. We'll talk level length just briefly before we end. Most levels in the earlier games are shorter. They're usually like, 15 to 20 minutes per level. But as storage space has increased, demands have increased, and they've been more comfortable with their game engine that they do all the Lego games on, levels have increased as well in complexity and time it takes. So now, you could do a level in 30 to 40 minutes, but as far as I'm aware, you still get more or less the same number of levels, so you're getting maybe twice the playthrough that you did of 10 years ago, which it's a little harder for drop in, drop out if you just want to do a quick burst and then go do something else. But most people will dedicate, and they started introducing a save system in between these levels. They're basically multi-stage levels really, because quite often you will switch scenes between. So for instance, in Lego Star Wars, Lego Force Awakens specifically, the first level, which introduces you to a lot of the concepts, is the Battle for Endor. So you start off with Vader and Luke in the Emperor's throne room. Then you switch to Han and Leia on the surface, and you get a save point there. And then you switch to Lando and Wedge in space, and you get a quick save point there as well, I believe. It's been a few days since I've played it, but the general gist is that each time there is a change of scenery, it gives you the option to save. And they've been doing that since, at the very earliest I can remember, is Marvel Superheroes. That's when they started doing it, I think. So a fairly new mechanism, but they needed it for the increased time frame for each level. So that's a good thing. And as far as I'm aware, that save point does save for if you need to quit and then come back in. I haven't tested it, mainly because when I sit down for a Lego game, I tend to spend hours and hours playing Lego, and loving pretty much every minute of it. Well, I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll leave some links down for the various games you can buy. Right, have a good one.